Hi, you're watching our special coverage of the UK election. Today's vote will decide the fate of Prime Minister Theresa May's great gamble. This time she seeks her own majority instead of what she inherited from predecessor David Cameron, as well as decide the shape of the crucial Brexit negotiations. This is a gamble because a lot has changed in the last 52 days. Well, before that, in fact, that was the time when Theresa May called for snap polls. May had what many saw as an insurmountable lead over her political rivals, a lead that could actually widen her current majority in the House of Commons. But then came the Manchester bombing on the 22nd of May and the London bridge van and stabbing attacks on the 3rd of June. The Manchester attack left at least 22 people dead, some 119 injured, while at least 8 were killed and more than 50 injured in the assault at the London Bridge. Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, quickly jumped on the opportunity to remind voters what May did when she was the Home Secretary. She oversaw cuts to the police department of some 20,000 local officers. Suddenly, the 68-year-old socialist appeared within striking distance of number 10 Downing Street. Well, over the next half an hour, we talk about the UK election in the context of terror, what's on the voters' mind, and whether the latest terror incidents will have a significant impact on the final results, and if yes, then to what extent. First up, a look at this report.
I have, throughout my many years in politics, I've always been very clear. I never set expectations of that sort, and I never predict election results. What I do is go out and campaign to earn the trust and support of the British people.
Brave words even as Theresa May battled dwindling support amid repeated terror attacks. When she announced snap polls in April, Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party was 21 points behind May's Conservatives, a lead that was the largest held by an incumbent government in 30 years. In the first poll after the Manchester attack, the Tory lead was slashed to just 5 points over the Labour Party. On May 31st, the YouGov poll predicted a hung parliament with the Tories down to 310, 16 short of majority. The same poll said that the Labour Party would get 257 seats, up from 229 last time. In another poll by Ipsos Mori, the Labour Party was up to 40% with the Tories at 45%. The same poll also indicated that satisfaction with May had fallen to 43%, her lowest rating till date. A latest YouGov poll published on the 5th of June shows that Theresa May might fall short of a majority by 21 seats. The betting market too says the polls are getting too close to call. Bookmakers Ladbrokes said last week that the Conservative Party was still favoured to win despite the polls narrowing between the government and the opposition. But there is growing support for a shock Labour win.
A couple of weeks ago, you could have got 1 to 50 on the Tories, so they are drifting like a barge right now, and that's because all of the momentum is with Labour and Jeremy Corbyn. Loads and loads and loads of punters are piling in thousands of pounds on Jeremy Corbyn, causing the biggest political upset we've seen in many, many years.
By all counts, Theresa May is slowing down, and significantly so. Do the recent terror attacks have anything to do with it? There are no clear indications on that count, but terror impact or not, the Labour Party is wasting no time in rubbing it in.
The cynics started this election by saying nothing can change, nothing can alter, nothing can happen. And do you know what's happened? Thousands and thousands and thousands of people have come into our campaign offices, met up with our candidates and got out there door knocking, donating small sums of money to the Labour Party.
There are dissenting voices from even within her own party. David Cameron's former policy guru Steve Hilton has called for her resignation. In a tweet he said, Theresa May is responsible for security failures of London Bridge, Manchester and Westminster Bridge. She should be resigning, not seeking re-election, unquote. Clearly, it's an embattled Theresa May who heads into this election. Will she still manage to pull through convincingly, or will the Labour Party end up with a shock win? The world will soon know. Bureau Report, WION.
All right. Right, so the impact of terror incidents on the UK election, that's what we'll be talking about. Joining me live from London at this point is Emil Gesson. He is a former Royal Marine Commando. And Mandy Clark, WION's bureau chief in London, is also live with us. Here with me in the studio is the foreign editor of the Hindustan Times, Pramit Pal Chaudhary. Mandy, first up, coming to you. From a 20 percentage point lead to barely 1 percentage point lead, it seems that a lot has changed in the last couple of weeks as far as Theresa May's ratings are concerned. How much of it do analysts, do people in Britain attribute to the terror incidents that we've seen in the last few days?
Well, certainly it's played a factor. How big a factor, we don't know. When this election was called, certainly her hope was it was going to be all about Brexit. That was her strong card, and that's where she saw she'd make her best ability. Of course, that changed with those terror attacks, and it diverted the national conversation. She has seemed a bit weak, especially with her record as Home Secretary when she made those drastic police cuts. 20,000 police were cut under her, and that has called into question how tough she will be on terror. So we know she's lost a lot. The reasons why are not entirely clear, but terror could have been a factor.
Right. Emil, coming to you at this point, what do you think? Of course, this is one move that's been criticized, especially this point being picked up by the Labour Party as far as getting off those 20,000 security personnel off the streets of Britain is concerned. But in your opinion, do you think the Labour Party would have done or will do a better job as far as keeping Britain secure is concerned in these times?
No. Under Jeremy Corbyn, I don't feel that the public have got the confidence in him when it comes to security of the country. Of course, Theresa May, when she was Home Secretary, cutting the 20,000 police, is falling into the lap of Jeremy Corbyn, who's been using it to his advantage at the moment. But as we saw with the London Bridge attack and the Manchester attack, security is high on this election now. Theresa May called it. It was a gamble. She went in trying to push for Brexit, and now public opinion's now changed from Brexit, and people are looking at the security of this country now. So we don't know at the moment, but definitely security is top of the agenda at the moment. But I think that there's a lot of people that lack confidence in Jeremy Corbyn, but at the same time, people are asking questions, why are there having so many terrorist attacks, and could Theresa May have done more? Right.
Emil, thanks so much for, laying out that opinion for us. But Pramit, very quickly, I want my producer to play out those shots of security around the area of the London Bridge where we've seen the last attack take place. When Theresa May called the snap election, things were very different. Right. Could anybody have imagined that these will be the scenes the day Britain goes to polls?
Not at all, because if you look at it, the record for British security has actually been very good. The last major attack, terrorist attack, was 2005, over 10 years ago. And suddenly, as you mentioned, in 3 months, you've had 3 major attacks and right. 5 intercepted attacks. So you've actually had almost every 10 days a major terrorist attempt in the United Kingdom. It's been an enormous explosion of violence, which something British, when I've talked to British intelligence and British officials, thought they were relatively confident would not happen. And I think the real issue is not so much as, I would argue, is not so much as security as much as leadership. What was striking for me was that Theresa May, in the interviews that she's done right. during the attack and since that, she's actually been remarkably, she's not been Churchillian. She's not at all a person that you have much confidence. She speaks in platitudes, hasn't said anything that strikes me as being particularly impressive.
But what you're saying, even I felt that, but then, what do you have on the other side of the table? You have Jeremy Corbyn, who correct. One could say could be, lower rated in those terms, hitting out yeah. hard, coming out with a plan.
Yeah, exactly, which is why you're looking at a very small swing. I mean, she's gone from 20 to maybe about 10 right now. So she's lost a 10 percentage point swing on that issue. And it's not clear that necessarily all of that has gone to Corbyn. Her real strength is really that the UK IP has declined dramatically. and they were eating away into Tory parties. And that vote has now gone back to the Tory party, which gives them the natural lead that she's expecting. But she's lost a bit because a lot of the, I think, fence-sitters on the vote have been looking at her and saying she's not really what we think we need, not just in terms of security, but is she strong enough to actually carry out the Brexit negotiations?
Right.
Because that's also going to be a big leadership issue. And so she is going to come in, unfortunately for her, she wanted a very powerful mandate to go into Brexit. And she may end up with I think she'll win, but I think it'll be a very weak mandate.
Right.
And that's not exactly what she wanted at all.
Absolutely. Mandy, in fact, taking on from where Pramit has left off, you know, what this election, when she called for a snap election for Theresa May, was all about strengthening her mandate, going in to negotiate a very strong Brexit deal, so to speak. And this is the first time that, in fact, you know, people are voting to elect her, you know, as the Prime Minister, because she took over from David Cameron. Do you think that terror attacks might have played a factor in this, and this would actually result in a weaker British Prime Minister in case, you know, her party wins?
Well, I don't know if it would be terror attacks, because I don't think Jeremy Corbyn is seen as a strong leader, and definitely not in the terms of fighting terror. He's a well-known pacifist. He's anti-nuclear weapons and led the Stop the War coalition. So he hasn't been on the forefront, and Labour has never been seen as a party that was going to be tough on security. That's always been the Conservative stronghold, but of course it's her old record that goes against her. Right before, just this week, she has said that she's willing to tear apart the human rights stature to allow counterterrorism officers the ability to look into terror suspects if the Human Rights Act is slowing them down. She'll take away that legislation. Certainly, she wants to win back any of that lost confidence after the terror attacks.
All right. In fact, Emil, coming to you at this point, you know, I want to quote a poll by The Sun, which says half of the voters think that the British Prime Minister is the best person to tackle terrorism, and twice as many voters think this is the biggest election issue after the London Bridge attacks. Would you agree with that? If not, why? If yes, why?
Totally. The public at the moment, there's a lack of confidence, as I was saying, on Jeremy Corbyn when it comes to homeland security. The thing with Theresa May, she's tried to talk tough, but people here in the UK want to see action from her. And leading into the next government, whoever takes over, if it is Theresa May, hopefully when she can change legislation when it comes to terrorism, it will go in her advantage. But there's still, like I was saying, there's a massive opinion here that Jeremy Corbyn, as Mandy was saying, is lack of enthusiasm for Trident, the nuclear capability, the fact he's vetoed all anti-terrorism laws that have been passed through government. People don't really think he's got, or don't have the confidence in him to lead the country, especially with his cabinet as well at the moment. So I personally don't think Jeremy Corbyn's going to win due to down at the moment, but due to the terrorism attacks at the moment, a lot of people are looking at. And I was in Mosul in Iraq a few weeks ago, and I was in a neighbourhood where some civilians had been liberated. And I said to one of the old gentlemen who had been liberated, I said to him, what was it like living under Islamic State? And he goes, at least we had security. They provided us security. And it's the same when I was in Afghanistan, when I was in the military. Speak to the locals. I go, what can we offer you? He goes, security. And it comes down to that everyone wants security. And this is why it's playing such a big issue in this election. And who's going to deliver that security is a lot of people are frowning upon Theresa May because she was a Home Secretary. But as your other guest was saying, the last major terrorist attack was in 2005.
Right.
So really going into her watch when she was Home Secretary, there wasn't any terrorist attacks. So she actually done her job in that sense. But now she's a Prime Minister, all eyes are on her, and Jeremy Corbyn's taking advantage of this at the moment.
All right. And Pramit, you know, almost in all of the previous London elections in Britain, we've seen the economy take centre stage, and this time it was all about Brexit. But if you look at this poll, it emerges as, you know, the biggest issue in these elections after the London Bridge attacks. When you compare the way Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn are looking at it, how much of weightage would you give to their policies on immigration as well at this point?
Well, I think immigration was in many ways the issue on which Theresa May was able to defeat and destroy the UK IP challenge. The problem with the Tory party, as I mentioned, was a large chunk, about 20% of their support base, had defected to UKIP on that single issue. And she has been very, very adamant, as Cameron was before her. You've seen that even when her talks with India, that while she's wooing India for economic reasons as an alternative to the EU, whenever India says, well, we want to have the immigration door kept open, she said that's not negotiable. And she's retained that as the one thing that she will not back down on. And that remains, I think, for the base, the working class and so on base that which she's been mobilizing for the Tory vote and to wipe out the UKIP's base. That remains something she's not moving on. And I don't see that changing unless the economy itself begins to boom in a certain manner.
All right. In fact, let's take a pause for a moment over here and take a look at what Theresa May said just a few days ago, well, in the final days of an election campaign that has been marred by terror attacks in London and Manchester. She stepped up her rhetoric against the Islamist extremism, pledging to ensure security services had the powers they needed. She, in fact, said she is prepared to rip up human rights laws to impose new restrictions on terror suspects. Here's what she said.
I mean, making it easier for the authorities to deport foreign terrorist suspects back to their own countries. And I mean doing more to restrict the freedom and movements of terrorist suspects when we have enough evidence to know they are a threat, but not enough evidence to prosecute them in full in court. And if our human rights laws stop us from doing it, we'll change the laws so we can do it.
Well, a statement has sparked fears from UK and international rights charities that the Tories will attempt to achieve a long-term ambition of some in the party and withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. The UK arm of Amnesty International hit out at Theresa May.
It's outrageous. It's just outrageous. I mean, I think the idea that she's ready to tear up human rights principles, I mean, they've been tearing up quite a lot already. They've already introduced one of the most extreme surveillance laws anywhere in the world that was introduced already a year ago. So, and this is the whole challenge with this conversation. It's like you are trying to choose between security or human rights. And our view from the beginning is that it's not human rights or security, it's human rights for security, because otherwise you're creating a cycle of violence. If you're going to behave in the same way that the so-called terrorists behave, what exactly is the difference?
All right, with that, it's time for closing comments. Emil, to you first, then I'll go to Pramit, and then I'll come to Mandy. Emil, this, many would say, as these rights groups, this is a time that human rights must be protected. But many would also say that this is exactly the kind of tough talk that they expect from the Prime Minister, which the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, has lacked so far. What would you say?
Yeah, definitely. This is what people are looking at here in the UK. They're looking for strong leadership. And the whole election campaign's been really about Theresa May's personality and Jeremy Corbyn's. It's been quite a bit of an assassination attack on one another. But yeah, definitely people want to see more action be done. When it comes to human rights, I don't think we're talking about totally neglecting human rights here. What we're talking about, I think, in the UK, and what Mrs May talked about, is using a little bit more common sense to stop allowing these terrorists, or these potential terrorists, playing the system, walking a fine line on infringement of their human rights, when we all know these people are a threat to the UK.
All right, and from it?
Yeah, I think the core issue is going to be, can you detain a person who is showing signs of militancy or action before he actually commits an act of terrorism? The problem that we're facing in Europe, in almost every case, and whether in France and so on, is you're getting all of these fellows who are on the watch list, who are on these huge lists of 8,000 or 10,000 people, and the police say, well, they haven't done anything, and then suddenly, bang, they carry out an act of terrorism.
Right.
And now the mood is you've got to do something about these type of people. There has to be a view that their rights have to be curtailed, and they have to be curtailed just on the basis of looking like they're going to do something or being in some way terroristic in their thinking before they actually act, because by then it's too late. And I think that's where you're going to see a shift in the laws in a lot of countries. sort of preventive detention, if you wish, is going to become much more common.
And in some of the cases, prior intelligence is there, but still there's no action, the point that you're mentioning. And Mandy, is this something that the voters are taking, in very seriously, this kind of strong talk coming in from the Prime Minister, while that has been absent from, Jeremy Corbyn's interviews and speeches?
Yeah, I think, that's what people want right now is tough talk, especially in the wake of terror attacks. People are willing to give away essential rights for security. I think that is just one of the natural instincts. If they could give up a little bit of those rights to ensure security, it's not necessarily one or the other, but in the way it's been framed, most of the public are willing to take that gamble to give greater powers of rights to the government to ensure greater security.
Absolutely. Well, it's D-Day tomorrow. Early morning, WION's coverage starts on the results that will begin to come out as far as Britain's election is concerned. For the moment, thanks so much, Emil Gesson, Pramitpal Chaudhary and Mandy Clark for joining me on the show. We're going to be taking a short break. News and updates continue right here on WION.